today we're looking at solving equations with algebraic fractions. So the difference about these today is actually this word equations. If you'll notice, all of these have an equal sign. And nothing that we've done in this chapter so far has had equal signs. If we look back at what we did in 6.1, you see all the problems were just expressions. They didn't have any equal signs. 6.2, no equal signs. It's just an expression. And when you have an expression, you just simplify it to its lowest terms. And then the same thing in 6.4. No equal signs. We were just simplifying an expression. So when you have an equation, so let me go back to one of these. So you weren't solving for anything, you were just simplifying it. We weren't solving for b. We didn't have to get b equals some number because we didn't have an equal sign. We were just combining like terms. But on today's problems, which that needs to focus. Today's problems have equal signs. So whenever you have an equal sign, you have to solve it for y equals or x equals that one number. Or if it has, if it's y to the first power, you would have one answer. But if it's r to the second power, like down here, you're going to have two answers. So normally when solving fractions, you'd have to find a common denominator and change all your fractions. And you could get the right answer that way, but man, it takes a lot of steps. And so the shortcut for these is when you have an equal sign, so this is only with an equation, you just multiply everything by the LCD, the least common denominator, and that gets rid of all the fractions. So you're going to do that in first step. So if you had me back in 0301, remember the steps for solving equations? Step one was to get rid of fractions. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to get rid of our fractions in the first step by multiplying everything by the least common denominator. Now the least common denominator is what we talked about last time. Let's pull this back out. In adding or subtracting. It's where you take one of every factor. For 2x and 7x, my common denominator was 14x. And so you're doing the same thing as changing fractions, except for now we're going to multiply everything by it. So when we look at all our denominators, if it doesn't have a fraction, it's assumed to be 1. You don't really have to write that down. So 1 doesn't really ever play into a common denominator. But we have a y1 and a y1, and so our common denominator is just y1. Because you always want to take the largest exponent, but both of them are just to the first power. So that just means we're going to multiply every single thing by y. And then we're going to simplify this right here. So this is back in multiplying fractions, but we're going to say y times 4 is 4y, divided by y is just 4. Or you can just think your y's would cancel, leaving you a 4. Then our plus comes down. Here your y's would cancel, leaving me a 1. And here nothing cancels, and 2 times y is 2y. So in one step, we got rid of our fractions. And now we just simplify the equation by combining our like terms over here. We need y by itself, so we can just divide both sides by y. So y would equal 5/2. And that's your answer. Anything to the first power has one answer. This next one, same thing. They just have a q and a q. This is considered to be a 1, so you don't have to worry about that. So our common denominator is q. So I'm going to multiply every single thing, including the 3. Even if it's not a fraction, you have to do every single term by that q. And so here it cancels, leaving you 11. The minus comes down. Q times 3 is 3q, and here the q's cancel, leaving me a 1. So do you see that one little step took a complicated problem and actually made it a very easy problem? So now I need to get q by itself. So I need to move my number to the right. So I'm going to minus 11 from both sides, which gives me a negative 3q equals a negative 10, because the signs are different. Subtract and take the sign of the larger. And then we're going to divide by the number in front of the letter. Let's write it over here. So q equals a positive 10/3 because 2 negatives make a positive. So once you get rid of the fractions, they're actually really easy problems. Okay, let's look at this next one. And again, it's all because of this equal sign that we can multiply by the common denominator. So we have an x and a 5, so we need one of both of those factors. So our common denominator is a 5x. We need one of every term. So I'm going to multiply this by 5x and this by 5x. When we look at this one, do you see your x's would cancel? So we're left with 5 times 7 minus 2x. Remember, this is one unit. You have to think of that together or in parentheses. And on this one, the 5's cancel, leaving me a negative 17x. Now we just solved this linear equation by distributing. So if you had me know 300, remember step 1, get rid of fractions. So we did that. Step 2, get rid of our parentheses. So we're going to multiply. Step 3, be aware of the equal sign and combine like terms, but there's nothing to combine. Step 4, move my letter to the left. So I'm going to move this 17x over here, which leaves me 35 plus 7x equals 0. Then number to the right, 7x equals negative 35. And then divide by the number in front. So x equals negative 5. Now there's always shortcuts to that. So you could have taken the letter to the right, and if you see those shortcuts, go ahead and take it. But if you had me know 300, we follow those 7 steps, and those will work every single time. But you can always use a shortcut. Okay, so let's get to one a little bit harder. So this time we have 3 terms. So do you see our denominators are, we have a 5, a 2, and a 10. And we need one of every factor. But before we can do that, let's look at 10 is a factor of 2 and 5, because 10 would actually break up to be 2 times 5. So when we go to look for a common denominator, we need a 5 and a 2, and this one already has a 2 and a 5. So you're going to only take one of each of these factors. So if something can be factored, you're wanting to factor it first and then take one of each. So I need a 5 and a 2, or my common denominator is a 10. So I'm going to multiply every single thing by 10. And remember, this is like a, one unit right there. It's going to go in parentheses. So here I say 5 goes into 10 2 times. 2 times 8p is 16p. Here, 2 will go into 10 5 times, so that's a 5 parentheses, 3p minus 4. And then here, the 10's completely cancel. Whoops, I ran out of room there, leaving me a 5. So I got rid of my fractions. Step 2, get rid of my parentheses. So just keep your equal sign where it is. So my equal sign's right there. So 5 times 3 is 15p, minus 5 times 4 is 20, plus 5. Be aware of your equal sign and combine like terms. Because these are on the same side, we can combine those together. So 16p equals 15p minus 15, because the signs are different. Subtract and take the sign a little larger. Move my letter to the left, and I'm left with p equals negative 15. And that's your answer. Okay, let's look at this next one. And so this one, some people think is a little bit harder. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was doing so good about keeping the camera still. A little bit harder because now we've got letters in the bottom, but really it's the same as this one, just in algebraic form. Because you see that this is considered one factor, one term. This is considered one factor, one term. And this is to the second power, which means this can be factored. This is the difference of 2 perfect squares. So this is r minus 3, r plus 3. So just like this one is a 5 and a 2, and this one was 2 and a 5, this is an r plus 3, r minus 3, and this one has both of them. And so that means for our common denominator, I need an r plus 3 and an r minus 3, and this one already has both of them. So our common denominator there is r plus 3, r minus 3. So this one gets a little confusing, so I'm going to change to green right here. But so we're going to multiply everything by r plus 3, r minus 3, r plus 3, r minus 3, r plus 3, r minus 3. And just like here we marked out the 5s and it left us 2, here we're going to mark out the r plus 3s, and you see that's going to leave me a 3 times r minus 3. You're always going to be left with the missing factor, the one that that fraction doesn't have. The minus comes down. This one, the r minus 3's cancel, and that's a 2 parentheses r plus 3 because you're left with 2 and then r plus 3. And then here, the r plus 3 cancels and the r minus 3 cancels. So all I'm left with there is a negative 12. So it's really the same thing. You're just thinking in terms of algebra. And so we got rid of our fractions. And so now we're going to get rid of our parentheses. So this would give me a 3r minus 9. Here we're distributing a negative 2, so watch your signs. That's going to give me a negative 2r minus 6 equals negative 12. Then we can combine like terms. 3r minus 2r is r. Negative 9 and negative 16 is a negative 15. And I still have that negative 12. And then we're going to add 15 to both sides. And we get r equals 3. Okay, the only problem with these when you have algebra in the bottom is you've got to always make sure that it doesn't make the answer equal to 0. So like if we go back to these, this one doesn't have a letter in the bottom, so it doesn't really matter. So this goes back to the rule that you can't divide by 0. So that means any fraction cannot have 0 as a denominator. So this one up here could be any number in the world. We got the answer 5/2, but if we'd have gotten y equals 0, the answer would have been undefined because you can't have a 0 on the bottom. You can't divide by 0. So for this one, y couldn't be equal to 0. This one, q couldn't be equal to 0. And so you've got to be careful. This one is just an x, so again, x couldn't equal 0. But when we get to this one, we've got an r plus 3 and an r minus 3. So your answer can be anything in the world except for what makes those denominators equal to 0. And so in your head, I'll just go over here, is you've got to think if the I can't talk today. We have the denominator of r plus 3 and we have the denominator of r minus 3. So for this one, r could not equal negative 3 because do you see negative 3 plus 3 would make that a 0? And this one, r cannot equal positive 3 because that would make that one a 0. So anytime there's a letter on the bottom, you solve it just as normal, but you have to plug that back in. And so here, 3 would say 3 plus 3 is 6, we're fine. But here, 3 minus 3 would give you 0, and you can't divide by 0. You can't have a 0 on the denominator. So the answer for this one is actually no solution. So whenever you have a letter on the bottom, you go ahead and solve it as normal, but then you plug that number back in to make sure that it isn't undefined. So let's look at this next one, which was kind of the same type of problem, and you'll kind of see what's different between the two of them. So when we look at this one, our factors are y minus 5, y plus 5, and then if you factored this one, it would be y minus 5, y plus 5. So our common denominator, we need one of each factor. So our common denominator is this y minus 5, y plus 5. So we're going to multiply everything by y minus 5, y plus 5. Now, while I'm writing these, let's think about what the answer can be. The answer can be anything except for r cannot be positive or negative 5, because a positive 5 would make this one 0 and a negative 5 would make that one 0. So if you get any other answer in the world, it's fine. But if you get either of these answers, then your answer is no solution. So let's look at this first one. The y minus 5's cancel, the y plus 5's cancel, and we're left with just 2y. This one, the y plus 5's cancel, and we're left with 8 times y minus 5. This minus comes down, and then our y minus 5's cancel, and we're left with a negative 1 times y plus 5. So we got rid of our fractions. Now we're going to get rid of our parentheses. So 2y equals 8y minus 40 minus 1y minus 5. Remember when you distribute your negative. Combine like terms. This would give me a 7y, whoops, and this would give me a negative 45. Bring down the rest of the problem. Letter to the left. So I get a negative 5y equals a negative 45. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm off camera. Divide by -5, y equals 9. So because my answer wasn't 5 or -5, then 9 could be our answer. But because up here, because r is 3, and when you plug 3 in, 3 minus 3 gives you 0, that can't be an answer, so that's no solution. Because remember, you can't divide by 0. It would give you a no solution. So that's 6.6 algebraic equations, and so you're ready for the 6.6 practice problems.